Let's start from the wound you least want to touch. The person who sleeps beside you, the one you call partner, spouse, my person, even soulmate, might also be the person holding the keys to your cell. You don't notice the bars because they look like kindness. The chains feel like hugs. But count the moments. Every glance that makes you rush to explain yourself. Every small phrase that pushes you to be agreeable. Every heavy silence that plants guilt like a seed in your gut. Each one forges a new shackle, hammered quietly into your mind. Little by little, you traded love for the most sophisticated form of slavery there is. The kind that convinces you you're choosing freely while you leak pieces of yourself to keep the peace. You want proof? Rewind your week. When was the last time you swallowed what you truly believed to avoid a fight? When did you reshape a habit not because you decided it was right, but because you were afraid of disapproval? Now ask the question that matters. Who's running your life, your judgment, or their mood? Marcus Aurelius, who had no patience for illusions, said it with the kind of clarity that cuts. Strength that depends on anything external can be snatched in a heartbeat. And yet here you are, outsourcing your inner weather to someone else's passing clouds. That isn't love. That's dependence wearing a pretty outfit. We dress marriage up as sacred ritual, family celebration, an eternal vow. But scrape the gold leaf and what remains? A contract that often binds you to the expectations of a person who might not even know themselves. The sacrifice in that pact isn't romantic, it's corrosive. You don't just give up a few bad habits or a handful of weekends. You put your autonomy, the only wealth no one can grant or revoke, up for negotiation. Then you learn to perform. The ideal partner on the stage of daily life. The audience applauds the script. Inside, the actor forgets their real voice. Stoicism never promised soft cushions. It offered a weapon, self-discipline, and solitude. The thing you were taught to dread isn't a desert, it's a laboratory. Sit in a room without distractions, no messages, no algorithm drip, no forced company, and the first thing you'll meet is panic. Your mind will beg for noise. It will reach for a face, any face, to rescue it from the mirror. That terror is diagnostic. Whoever can't stand being alone can't stand meeting themselves. And if you can't meet yourself, you will let others define you. So here's the question you'd rather dodge. What have you built that doesn't depend on another human being's approval? For most people, the answer is air. They invested in validation, in the promise of forever, in the brand of being chosen. When the scaffolding shakes, there's nothing underneath. No foundation. Only the realization that you never belong to yourself. Marriage, sold as refuge, works like a sedative. It soothes. It distracts. It gives you a script, a role, a schedule of anniversaries and obligations, a sense of purpose borrowed on credit. And one day you wake up and realize you traded your greatness for a plate of emotional crumbs. The Stoics talked about the inner citadel, an unassailable space built of principles and practice. But how do you set stone if every brick needs someone's permission? How do you become resilient if your mood toggles with a thumbs up, a nod at dinner, a text answered on time? You're not building a wall. You're building an altar to volatility. When your happiness depends on another person, every day becomes a spin of emotional roulette. Irony stares you in the face. You ran toward company to feel less alone and ended up lonelier because you abandoned the only companionship that ever mattered, your own. You sought love to feel complete and eroded your identity by mortgaging it for reassurance. You wanted stability and handed the keys of your peace to someone who hasn't found their own. We call this commitment, as if the word itself carried virtue. But commitment without clarity collapses into captivity. True love, if we dare to use the phrase, can arise only from abundance, not from lack. From a person who has conquered their own mind enough not to bargain away their freedom. That's rare. Common instead is the collision of two unfinished selves trying to fuse their voids and hoping it will add up to fullness. We normalize it, we hype it, we frame the wedding as the summit of happiness when, for many, it's simply the ceremony of renunciation. Here's the brutal edge. Marriage doesn't just haggle with your autonomy, it taxes your destiny. Count the projects shelved for the relationship. The dreams postponed because they would cause friction. The unnecessary sacrifices performed as proof of love. Each one is another nail in the coffin of your potential. And the worst part is you do it smiling, convinced you are doing the noble thing, because nobody told you the cost. By contrast, solitude, the dragon you've been trained to fear, is the doorway to kingship over yourself. In solitude, you learn to carry your thoughts without running. You discover that happiness isn't begged for, it's engineered. You start laying stone for that inner citadel that betrayal can't breach and loss can't topple. For the first time, you experience ownership of your mornings, your decisions, your time, your mind. But the default is easier. Put on the role, dress in white, smile for the photos, let the applause drown the whisper that says something is off. It's easier to sign your sentence than sit with the silence of an empty room and the questions that come with it. That's why so many choose the golden chain over abrasive freedom. Because freedom stings. Freedom demands that you remove the masks and endure your reflection. So make it concrete. If tomorrow, without warning, your partner vanished from your life, what would remain of you? If the honest answer is, I don't know, then know this: you were never you. You were a shadow attached to another shadow. That's the secret people don't say out loud. Most don't love, they cling. And marriage, far from redeeming them, stamps the dependency with official seals: rings, flowers, signatures, congratulations. If this stirs discomfort, good. The tension you feel right now, that tug to defend your relationship while another part of you nods, is your mind rattling its chains. If you have the courage to look straight at it, you'll see what's been true for a long time. You weren't in love, you were managed. And the only exit, the only one, is to claim solitude as the highest act of self-respect. You were taught that partnership is destiny and walking alone is failure. That lesson didn't come from your reason, it came from early programming. Solitude means you're broken. Marriage means you've made it. Romance is the only path to fulfillment. Stop and ask, when did you choose those beliefs? Or did they come pre-installed, wrapped as wisdom? What you call choice might be obedience with better PR. As a kid, you're incomplete without a crush. As an adult, you're behind if you're single. After marriage, you're suspect if you don't have children. After children, your life must orbit them entirely. The treadmill never ends, and each step guarantees you will never fully belong to yourself. Marriage is the heaviest gear in that machine because it institutionalizes dependence. Then it glamorizes suffering as proof of love. Pain becomes a credential. How perverse is that? Look around. How many marriages you know are temples of love, and how many are quiet battlefields? Coexistence out of fear of emptiness, affection traded for convenience, routines disguised as meaning with photos and parties. And there you are, imagining that entering the same circus will produce a different show. Psychology is blunt. Emotional dependence erodes identity. First you stop with small things, then you shelve the big ones. Eventually you forget who you were before the performance began. They call it maturity. They call it commitment. But the accurate word is amnesia. Pause there. Let that sink in. Then decide whether you'll keep playing the role or start building the citadel. Here's the part nobody warns you about when they hand you the fairy tale script. Dependency doesn't shout, it whispers. It shows up as gentle requests that harden into rules, as preferences that turn into prohibitions, as little bargains that multiply like weeds. Psychology puts it in black and white. When two dependent people find each other, they don't create safety, they form an anxiety engine. One dreads abandonment, the other dreads inadequacy, and together they orbit a sun called fear. Every check-in becomes surveillance. Every reassurance becomes fuel for the next insecurity. They call it love. It behaves like a pact of mutual sabotage. Watch how it unfolds in the small things. A call you didn't answer instantly is recast as proof of disinterest. A delayed message becomes a referendum on devotion. A neutral look is translated as contempt. None of this is about phones, replies, or glances. It's about a nervous system hunting for threats because it never learned to be quiet in solitude. When your inner ground isn't firm, every footstep feels like an earthquake. Silence becomes an offense. Space becomes abandonment. You escalate from facts to stories to wars. That war doesn't just cost you a peaceful evening. It taxes the one resource you can never refill: mental energy. That's the invisible slavery. Hours spent replaying conversations in your head, decoding tone, reading tea leaves and punctuation. Nights sacrificed to mind reading. Mornings dulled by the hangover of imaginary arguments. Meanwhile, the projects you once cared about recede into fog. The book you promised yourself sits unopened. The skill you wanted to learn waits at the door. your purpose becomes a ghost. And for what? To sustain an arrangement whose health depends on variables you can't control. That's not a refuge. That's a factory one that manufactures worry at scale. The Stoic lens slices through the fog. If your peace can be removed by another, it was never yours. It's the equivalent of storing your treasure at your neighbor's house and hoping they lock the door. How long before it goes missing? What sense is there in tethering your happiness to something as unstable as another person's feelings? Feelings that change with sleep, blood sugar, stress, memories, weather, and 100 hidden inputs. Real peace doesn't need external guards. It requires instead the training to sit with yourself when the urges itch and the old fears knock. Stop here and make it practical. Trace your last 5 big decisions. How many were shaped by pleasing your partner or by the attempt to earn one? University programs, job choices, friends kept or dropped, hobbies quietly buried because they send the wrong signal. Each time you amputated a part of yourself to keep the relationship breathing, you didn't make a romantic gesture, you narrowed your life. The sum of those amputations is what you now call compromise. But if the total cost is your identity, that's not compromise, that's surrender. The world, of course, doesn't wait while you negotiate with your cage. Opportunities pass their prime, capacity declines when unused, curiosity calcifies. Not because life is cruel, but because you spent your prime bandwidth managing anxiety disguised as love. And here is the sting that turns the knife. No one stole that time. You signed it away. If there's a thief, it's the part of you that prefers the anesthesia of company to the edge of independence. The contract roses, vows, congratulatory toasts was a transaction. You traded freedom for the feeling of being chosen. All transactions carry hidden fees. In this one, the surcharge is your purpose. The only move that breaks the spell is the one you've been trained to distrust. Walking alone, not as a protest, not as a performance, but as a practice. In that stark quiet, you lift actual weights, discipline, attention, clarity. You discover that the mind doesn't need to be coddled, it needs to be conditioned. That joy isn't delivered, it's built. In the gym of solitude, you learn to metabolize emptiness instead of running from it. Your cravings for external validation weaken. Your ability to choose strengthens. The citadel you heard about stops being a metaphor and starts being a daily architecture. Wake time you own, work you respect, rest you've earned, values you can explain. None of this demands hatred of love. It demands accuracy. Strip the costume. Love should not be a license to outsource your spine. Any bond that requires you to shrink to fit isn't a bond, it's a bind. Love that deserves the name will not ask you to abandon your inner post. It will arise where abundance meets abundance, 2 sovereigns with open gates, not 2 beggars fighting over a single bowl. Now let's return to the script you inherited without consent, the programming that told you solitude equals failure and marriage equals arrival. You didn't sit down and choose that framework. You absorbed it during your most impressionable years. As a teenager, you're told your status hinges on pairing up. As a young adult, your worth is indexed to engagement announcements. After the wedding, you're measured by fertility timelines. And once children arrive, your individuality is supposed to dissolve into selflessness. The treadmill never stops, because the machine isn't designed to produce wise, autonomous people. It's designed to produce predictable ones. Notice how the machine reframes pain. If you hurt, it says you're growing. If you're losing yourself, it's sacrifice. If you can't remember what you love, that's maturity. Words are spells. The right spell can make you clap for your own chains. By the time you suspect something is off, your life is already organized around obligations that feel immovable. But immovable is a story, and stories can be rewritten. Let's widen the lens on projection, because this is the engine under so many couple fights. What you haven't made peace with inside will show up outside wearing your partner's face. Old abandonment becomes anger at slow replies. Old shame becomes disgust at carelessness. Untamed ambition morphs into contempt for their routines. In a 2-person system, unresolved parts don't vanish. They double. You start managing each other's ghosts. The house becomes a haunted museum where every object holds a grievance. It's here that the most precious thing slips through your fingers. Time. Not calendar time, psychological time. The hours you spend alert, present, lucid. Independency, attention is a currency you spend badly. You leak it through hypervigilance, sarcasm, passive aggression, rehearsed speeches, detective work in text threads. By night, you're exhausted. Not from building anything, but from guarding a fragile piece that breaks anyway. One ancient voice warned that we're not short on time, we're prodigal with it. There's no faster way to be prodigal than pouring your vitality into a bond that can't hold it. Contrast that with a day in clean solitude. No one to placate, no emotional court to attend. You choose your task deep and long and finish it. You move your body. You eat like someone who respects themselves. You read things that sharpen you. You call a friend because you want to, not because you're afraid of appearing distant. You go to sleep without a courtroom running in your skull. Multiply that by a year and tell me which life compounds. The harshest realization, and the liberating one, is that no one is coming to unlock the cell. Not your partner, not your parents, not your wisest friend. The key is already on your neck, disguised as silence you refuse to enter. If you turn it, you don't become a hermit. You become a steward of your time, your choices, your craft, your word. You stop asking for permission to be the person you already suspect you are. Some of you feel defensive right now. Good. Defense means the arrow hits something solid. Let the discomfort do its work. You don't have to leave anyone today. You don't have to blow up a life. You do have to tell the truth, at least to yourself, about the bargain you struck and whether it's worthy of you. If it isn't, change begins not with a dramatic exit, but with a quiet, stubborn reallocation of allegiance from the relationship's demand to your mind's long-term health. And if you want a line to test everything by, use this. Any arrangement that asks you to betray your inner post is asking too much. Keep that line. We'll cross the final threshold next. What happens when you step fully into solitude not as exile, but as sovereignty, and how love, if it appears, looks entirely different on the far side of freedom. Freedom isn't the absence of people, it's the presence of yourself. When you finally step across that threshold, solitude stops feeling like exile and starts reading like sovereignty. The room is the same. The light is the same. The chair and the desk haven't moved an inch. What changes is the posture of your mind. You're no longer waiting for a message to tell you who you are today. You're no longer grading your worth by the heat of someone's attention. Your pulse stops chasing notifications and starts syncing to your own work, your own rhythm, your own code. What actually happens, practically? First, your attention returns. Like a muscle that's been in a cast, it feels weak. You'll reach for the comfort of distractions. You'll feel the itch to ask someone what they think, to outsource your next step. Resist just long enough to relearn how to stand. Pick one thing you care about, one project, one body practice, one course, one skill, and commit to it for a season. Not forever, 90 days. Measure progress in hours you showed up, not in compliments you gathered. Your nervous system has to experience the win of self-generated momentum. Talk doesn't rebuild a spine, reps do. Second, you redraw your borders. Dependency blurs lines until you can't tell where your preference ends and someone else's starts. Solitude is the cleanup crew. Make a simple list. Non-negotiables: sleep, work blocks, training, reading, and negotiable social plans, favors, spontaneous trips. If a bond, romantic or otherwise, consistently violates the non-negotiables, that bond is not an ally of your future. You don't need a fight. You need a boundary. Quiet, clear, enforced. A boundary isn't a wall against love. It's the architecture that makes love possible without self-erosion. Third, you audit your inputs. Dependency thrives on sugar. Guilty scrolls, outrage hits, ambient comparison. Remove the drip. Replace it with hard calories. Books that sharpen you, conversations that challenge you without belittling you, mentors alive or dead who demand you rise. If you don't curate your influences, the algorithm will curate your identity. Remember the Stoic rule: if something steals your control, treat it like a thief. Fourth, you tell the truth, not performative truth, private truth. Journal with brutality. Where are you lying to yourself to preserve a role? Where are you calling envy, concern, fear, prudence, exhaustion, loyalty? Write until the alibis collapse. Then make one small move that a truthful person would make. Send the email. Decline the invitation. Start the draft. Book the class. Don't announce it. Do it. Here's the part that confuses people. Solitude won't make you anti-relationship. It makes you anti-illusion. On the far side of sovereignty, love changes shape. You stop shopping for a savior. You stop performing worthiness. You're not auditioning. You're inviting. You're not bargaining. You're building. Two complete people don't merge into one fragile identity. They collaborate between two strong ones. You don't need constant reassurance because you're not renting your self-respect from another's attention. Jealousy loses its oxygen when your day is already full of things that matter. Control evaporates when you don't confuse proximity with safety. What does a free love look like in practice? Agreements instead of assumptions, requests instead of demands, boundaries without punishments, space that isn't weaponized, affection that isn't currency, a calendar that honors both people's missions, disagreements that aim at reality, not victory, a bias toward repair that doesn't require self-betrayal. And this core rule: we don't ask each other to trade in our inner post for temporary comfort. You will still feel fear. You will still feel loneliness. Don't mythologize sovereignty into immortality. The difference is that fear no longer steers the ship. Loneliness stops being a verdict and becomes a signal. Return to the citadel. Refill. You'll notice the old cravings visiting validation, control, anxious checking, and you'll meet them with training instead of submission. 10 deep breaths, a walk without headphones, a page of notes, 50 push-ups, back to the task, back to the day. Small, boring, decisive moves. This is how freedom roots. Let's speak directly to the objections. But isn't sacrifice part of love? Yes, but sacrifice is only clean when made from surplus, not scarcity. If giving costs you your core, it wasn't noble. It was self-abandonment in a tuxedo. Isn't marriage a source of meaning for many? It can be when it's a partnership between two people who already carry meaning, who protect each other's non-negotiables, who would remain whole if the other vanished. Then the contract is not a cage, it's a container. If that's you, you don't feel indicted by any of this, because the shoe doesn't fit. What if I'm already deep in dependency? Then your way out is staged, not explosive. Start with attention, boundaries, inputs, truth. Reclaim an hour a day and defend it like your life depends on it, because it does. Build a body of work so your days can hold their own weight. Have one terrifyingly honest conversation with your partner about the bargain you've been making. If they're an ally, they'll join you in rewiring. If they're not, you'll learn what you needed to know. Now, the tests. Freedom is proved in friction. Test of time. Can you spend a weekend alone without numbing? If not, schedule one. Remove escape hatches. Cook, train, read, make, walk. Don't post, don't narrate, live it. Test of truth. Can you disagree without performing or collapsing? Practice on small stakes. I hear you. My answer is no. Repeat until your nervous system believes you won't abandon yourself. Test of work. Do you have a craft that would make you proud even if no one ever clapped? If not, pick one. Build daily. Let your identity anchor there, not in being chosen. Test of loss. When rejected, do you chase or return to the citadel? Choose return. Write the plan for the next 7 days and execute it. Grieve with discipline. Move. On the other side of these tests, life composes itself differently. Mornings aren't verdicts, they're starts. You stop asking, do they still love me? And start asking, did I keep my word today? Friends shift. Some will resent your boundaries because your freedom exposes their bargains. Bless them and keep walking. New people appear, builders, readers, disciplined souls, because like signals, like you become allergic to drama because it's too expensive for what it buys. Peace isn't boring anymore. It's a competitive edge. Eventually, you notice something almost mystical. The inner citadel isn't just shelter. It's a lighthouse. You stop hunting for love and start attracting respect. The relationships you do keep grow simpler and deeper. There's more quiet, more creativity, more laughter that doesn't leave a hangover. And if love arrives, it arrives as an echo of abundance, not a cure for emptiness. If it leaves, your life remains intact, because you never pawned your center to fund it. This is the part where I could offer 3 hacks or 10 tips. You don't need hacks, you need a vow. Not to a person, to your post. Say it in your own words if you want, but mean it with your schedule. I do not outsource my peace. I do not trade my purpose for proximity. I will be kind without self-erasure. I will love without leaving myself. If this message irritated you, sit with it. If it relieved you, act on it. If it shook you awake, write one line in the comments so your future self can't pretend you didn't hear it. The inner citadel is mine. Subscribe if you want more inconvenient truths, more mirrors that don't flatter, more tools that don't coddle, because the point isn't to make you comfortable, it's to make you sovereign. And now, forget my voice. Don't quote this tomorrow. Don't make it a personality. Close the tab, keep the vow, build the day. If the echo stays with you and stings, good. That's your greatness, knocking for entry. Open the door.